It is Friday, December 13th. Let's talk PlayStation. Boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to go over. This is going to be a good one. First, we'll start with our December PS Plus games. As a reminder, it's Titanfall 2 and Monster Energy Supercross. Plenty of time to download either of these games or add them to your library. Now, let's start with the Game Awards. I think we have to do that. The event was last night, and real quick, if you remember, on Tuesday, we had a State of Play, which I did a recap impressions Q&A for already. It's the upload right behind this one if you didn't see. But in that State of Play, we saw a quick teaser for Ghost of Tsushima, and then it was promised that we would get a full trailer at the Game Awards, and that's what we got. So starting off, we got a full trailer of Ghost of Tsushima that looked not only very good, but we got a promised release window of summer 2020 on PlayStation 4. So I know this still gets a bit confusing for some people. This is still a PS4 game. I don't know why so many people think it's for PS5, but still for PS4, and we don't have a complete release date, which I felt was still too early for that. But we do have a window of summer 2020. So keep in mind, this is very much so, in all likelihood, our very last major PlayStation 4 exclusive before we usher in that new generation PlayStation 5. And I think the trailer I think this was the best footage of the game we've seen so far, whereas the other two trailers, good, but this had a lot more quick cuts to different clips of footage, you know what I mean? Giving us a better idea of how the game plays in different scenarios, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, this is a good segue, though, because another game that was announced, Godfall. This is a looter shooter, not even looter shooter, looter slasher they're calling it. AAA quality, so it looks very good, but might imply that it's a smaller scale title where it might be free-to-play or $20, $30 some odd dollars. But it was announced for PC, the Epic Game Store, and PlayStation 5. Now, this is very significant because technically, this is our first specifically announced game for PlayStation 5, which it might sound a bit odd to you because I also did a video about PS5 confirmed games. But in that video, you'll notice it's very important, the wording there. A lot of games that were announced and confirmed for PS5, the wording is that, hey, this game's coming to next generation platforms. This is our first game announced publicly on stage during an event with the label PlayStation 5. And also keep in mind, at the front row at the Game Awards was not only Mark Cerny, but our new head of Sony Worldwide Studios, Herman Hulse. So very much they were good to go on this. That is a announced PlayStation 5 title. And it's probably a timed exclusive. It'll come to the next Xbox at some point as well. But it's apparently going to be ready for PS5's launch, or probably a little bit close to it, I'd imagine. And that's what's significant here. But this is another good segue to the last, probably the largest announcement at the Game Awards. Totally unexpected, but Microsoft showed off their next-gen Xbox, and they gave it a name, Xbox Series X. So Phil Spencer came up on stage, talked a little bit about the next-gen platform, showed this very small 2-minute clip, some footage, the box arises, they show us what it looks like, then we get an Xbox Series X game, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, that is probably not going to be available on PlayStation 5. The footage looks good. They're claiming that very much is in-engine, not CG, pre-rendered or anything like that. It looks very impressive, and I wouldn't sit here and say that it doesn't look like realistic footage, because this is a good idea of what we could potentially see. These machines are very powerful, or more so, Xbox Series X is very powerful. So Microsoft did do a little, actually I believe it was GameSpot that had the scoop here, but we have some slight details on it. They didn't give us any specifics, but some of the key things that we can take away from this next-gen platform. 12 teraflop GPU, pushing it to be the most powerful console. 4 times the CPU of the outgoing X1X. There is a share button on the controller now. The controller didn't change all that much, but they do have a dedicated share button now, which Phil Spencer went out of his way to say we didn't invent that or anything. That's been there before, implying, kind of referencing PlayStation 4, not directly, but the share button's there now because apparently it's important to customers. Can pause and resume multiple games, so that was also a sticking point there. They didn't talk too much actually about the SSD, whereas it seems like a lot of what we've been hearing about PS5 is that Sony's really going to play to the marketing about how you can load and start games instantaneously, no load screens. That didn't seem as big of a push here, but we still have to see a bit more of the box. They made it a point to keep talking about that full backwards compatibility because Microsoft's been pretty good about that so far. You've got your original Xbox games, 360, and now X1 support as well. That was expected, but Microsoft already had those software emulators laid out for 360 and original Xbox games. Now, the design of the box, this is twofold because it was also pretty important that they kept mentioning how quiet this thing is. It's about as quiet as an Xbox One right now or an Xbox One X. Basically, you're not going to be able to hear this thing. You shouldn't from a reasonable distance, and this thing looks quite interesting. I mean, what's funny is that when we saw this right at the Game Awards, I thought, oh man, the internet's gonna chew this up, but it doesn't seem like that. I'm actually thoroughly surprised. There's some memes floating around, but it's not getting chewed out to the point of how badly I thought it would be. And I'm not really sure how to feel about it either. Now, you can lay it vertical or horizontal, so if you're looking at all the imagery where it's just vertical, it can be laid horizontally. The air is going to be pushed out from that top vent. I would imagine if it's vertical, I mean, they're going to have some sort of mesh right underneath the vent so dust doesn't just completely cluster into that box. And it does sound very powerful. Now, the teraflop rating, though, I mean, it's impressive, no doubt, but that doesn't tell the full story. Teraflop is always this general rating that doesn't really factor in certain SDK features and certain proprietary tech that may help or not help game development and what you can achieve in your software. That's very important. I mean, that's why something like PlayStation 3, for example, struggled for so long, just because of the architecture and the SDKs that were available in the early years of PS3. So hearing 12 teraflops and then worrying about where PlayStation 5 might land once Sony starts talking their numbers, I wouldn't worry about that too much yet. And as I've cautioned already, I wouldn't worry too much at all about which one's more powerful, because it really is going to be about that software at the end of the day, which Microsoft also is being very forward. This is a games machine. It's almost like they want to downplay what the box looks like in case you don't like it. They're just saying this thing is all about function over form. It's going to be quiet, and we're focusing on games. And thank God, because we all know how much of a disaster 2013 was for Microsoft, and so I am all for them really going for it. And this box is, make what you will of it. I know you might be asking why are we talking so much about Xbox, but it's very important that we talk about one of Sony's direct competitors. It just feels weird to somewhat ignore it. But yeah, it looks... I still don't know how to feel. I guess I'm indifferent. I'll say that. I don't think it's a very good looking box, but I also don't think it's necessarily bad either. I think, to be honest, I think X1X and X1S had the best console design, very close to 360. The name of the box is getting the most heat, probably. Xbox Series X could be very easily confused with Xbox One X, and there might be some tough struggles at retail in those early years where retail associates are asking that grandmother, what do you mean? Do you mean the One X? Do you mean the Series X? And there's a lot of confusion. The wrong box gets purchased, and you have an upset child during Christmas time. Hopefully that doesn't really become a major issue. I know it's very easy to compare that to the Wii U, but I don't think it will be that rough for Microsoft. And the Series nomenclature kind of implies that if we do get a lower entry Xbox like these rumors are currently suggesting, it would be named Xbox Series blank. They can change it and manipulate it to see a line of Xbox consoles, and that's likely what Microsoft's doing there. So what does this mean for PlayStation 5? Well, not much. Again, people like to think that, oh, Microsoft went first so Sony can react. It really doesn't work like that. I mean, there might be some things that has a bit of steer, a little bit of lean, in terms of certain aspects of the box, but most things are probably completely locked down when it comes to the engineering, the basic goals of the machine, the controller prototypes. I mean, a lot of this stuff, yeah, it's subject to change, but it's somewhat foolish to always expect that Sony can react to this thing. It just doesn't quite work like that. There are some things that have some steer, but not as much as you would think. So we just have to wait and see what Sony does. And we are still expecting a dedicated event in the early half of 2020, around February. But exiting away from the Game Awards stuff, we'll do some other somewhat smaller news stories, then we got some more PlayStation 5 to get back to. So first we have PS4 firmware 7.01 available now. I don't even think it's a mandatory upload or download, excuse me, but it's one of those software stability updates, so you're not pressured to download it just yet. Now, we had a new trailer for the Final Fantasy VII Remake at the Game Awards, but the real news here is that this past week, the box art for the game has been updated, and on the very bottom right corner, there is now a little tab that says timed exclusive until March 3rd, I believe, 2021. So what's really surprising to me is actually, I can't remember another example where this happened, where the box art actually reflects when the timed exclusivity is up. We all knew that it's a timed exclusive. It was announced as Play First on PS4, and we know it's going to come to Xbox. But what's fascinating to me is that not only is it a year's typical, but all the way out to 2021. Now you're just wondering, like, okay, do they already have it planned day and date? on that specific day when it's over, is it launching right away on Xbox One? And 2021, I mean, that's clearly, we've got next-gen platforms at that point. So I'm guessing 2021 is going to be the somewhat soft release of not only an Xbox One version, but a hard release of a version on Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5. See, now we can actually call it something. That's what I would imagine. Now, this next one was also kind of a big deal, but MLB The Show, the long-running PlayStation exclusive franchise, is not going to be exclusive anymore. So what happened is the contract license for MLB with Sony Interactive Entertainment came up again. It was re-signed. Sony Interactive Entertainment has the rights to Major League Baseball and video games, but there is a new contingency. The game has to be available on platforms beyond PlayStation. So it was a press release basically stating between Major League Baseball, the Major League Baseball Players Association, and Sony Interactive Entertainment that MLB will be brought to platforms beyond PlayStation. I'm seeing some people say it's just for PC. No, this is probably going to Xbox. I could even see it going to Switch. And so, I mean, yeah, it's like, it's a big deal, but it's also not. I mean, it's a sports game that releases every single year. I'm not trying to downplay the fact that it's a sports title. In fact, MLB's always been very popular on PlayStation. It's always been this weird little, almost this weird, really weird outlier where Sony has an annual exclusive sports title, you know? And they were really, if you want to play baseball, you have to own a PlayStation, is the crazy thing. But that doesn't have to be the case anymore. MLB obviously probably wants, you know, they want royalties everywhere. They don't want it on just PlayStation platforms. Sony wants to hold that license. And I know it's you know, it's the fanboy stuff coming in about Sony losing an exclusive, but to be honest, I mean, it's a get for Sony. They have the license. If they put, what's weird is that you're going to see a Sony Interactive Entertainment published game on other platforms. That is absolutely going to happen now. But Sony still, it's still their title. It's still their software sales. That's what's so weird about when people get worked up about exclusives going to other platforms. At the end of the day, PlayStation has actually reiterated a number of times that the brand is very important, that they must support PlayStation first and foremost. And, well, whether your IP is on PC or Xbox or Nintendo, it's a software sale, and that keeps PlayStation going. And we all know that at some point in the very long-term future where maybe consoles really don't have a place anymore, the PlayStation brand is going to evolve into something else. And that's where you may or may not want to play your video games depending on how well Sony does in that long-term future. But quite honestly, I'm going off on a tangent here, and realistically, this is just MLB The Show. Yeah, it's a long-running PlayStation exclusive, but it's not the next Uncharted, the next God of War, the next Horizon, the next Gran Turismo. It's MLB The Show. This is a game that's not really going to harm the brand, harm units being sold. I mean, not that many people bought PlayStations just to play baseball specifically, so I don't think it really necessarily harms the brand or damages Sony when it comes to their more marquee titles that I just mentioned. And just as a quick aside news story, Minecraft Bedrock Edition just came out, and this is, well, available on PlayStation 4, and this will allow you to finally cross-play with all the other platforms. So if your friends are on Switch, Xbox, PC, doesn't matter. But the caveat, just like the Switch version, is very much a reality on PlayStation 4, so you have to log into an Xbox Live account to play with friends on other platforms, which is quite a world we live in. And I even remember talking about this when the Switch version was announced and that caveat was announced. Nintendo, you know, they don't really care about that. They're always this kind of, they know their place in the industry. They know that they're a very they're always a secondary platform to so many other people's gaming habits. But they're also first to a lot of people, but they know that they're also seen as a secondary device. Whereas Sony probably is much more standoffish in this regard. That's why they kind of were dragged into cross-play kicking and screaming, but here we are. You have to log in Xbox Live to play it. Not a big deal, certainly, if you want to achieve it. I mean, Minecraft's such a communal game, so this really should have been there for a while now. I'm glad that kids don't have a problem with this now. It doesn't matter where your buddy is, you can play it. And if you buy the game on physical and you look on the back, you see Sony Interactive Entertainment, and then you see Xbox, Microsoft Game Studios. What a time to be alive. Moving on, if you had any fears about all the major shakeups at Sony's executive level the past few years now, quell your fears. The new head of Sony Worldwide Studios, Herman Hulst, had this to say to GameIndustry.biz. We are very committed to the types of games we've been making at Worldwide Studios for the last decade. Big, spectacular experiences with story and characters at the core. We will still keep making these games because we love to make them. You know, I really think Herman is a great fit for this role, and I am pretty excited to see him on stage whenever we start doing more press events for Sony again. He's surely going to be there for this PS5 reveal whenever we get that, and then subsequent E3s when they hold another PSX again. Not TGS, Gamescom, Paris Games Week, whatever they have. I think he's going to do really good. I mean, he's done there. He's been there and done that. He's directed and been a part of these major big franchises, and I can't wait to see how he manages worldwide studios. And more importantly, I think I'd love to see the new buying power that he potentially has. You assume he has a little bit of leeway now in terms of studio acquisitions that Sony's going to be very careful about still if they do intend to acquire another studio to add them to the suite of developers. But I'd love to see what he might look at and think, you know what, these guys fit the role of what we've been doing at SIE, which is these spectacular big budget games that that are worthy of this name to stand alongside our big titles like God of War and Uncharted and whatnot. And on the opposite side of that, we also have a new global head of indies at PlayStation. That is Greg Rice. He is formerly the vice president of business relations or business developments at Double Fine. Double Fine was recently acquired by Microsoft, so obviously he's not there anymore. Now he's at PlayStation. He'll be probably working alongside Shuhei Yoshida, so still fostering those relationships with indies. So, really think about this, though. Going into PS5, they're pretty forward about these new announcements in terms of people getting moved around, these new positions getting filled. We know they've got the first party covered when it comes to the big budget titles, but now we see this reinvigorated focus on indies, and that'll be very important going into the next gen as well, because it worked out so well for PS4, and it was unfortunate to see that downward spiral of less and less indie focus with PlayStation 4. Now, these next two news stories, it's not even really news, but I'm just going to acknowledge them real quick because I'm seeing some people ask about them, or why I didn't talk about one last week. This one is the PS5 launch and what games we can expect. So on the Split Screen podcast, Kotaku's Jason Schreier was talking about the PS5's launch titles, and he's hearing that we'll get some third-party stuff that's cross-gen, and then some that are PS5 only, likely from first party. And I guess this is news. I mean, who didn't really see this coming? That's kind of pretty formulaic when it comes to launches. Third party's going to want their games everywhere, even on the outgoing platforms that have a really large install base, whereas the next one won't have as large of an install base, so it's in the best interest of the hardware manufacturer to make sure they have some exclusive software ready. So it's pretty typical to expect that if it's exclusive to PS5, it's probably going to be a Sony game, and then if it's available on PS4 and PS5, and then also on X Series X, X1X, X1S, I'm going to try and roll those out now without tripping over my tongue here. You're going to see them try and, go for the high volume sales of whatever title that they're working on. So not really news. The other news story was in all those interviews regarding the 25th anniversary of PlayStation. One thing that apparently I glossed over and ignored was about how Sony kind of low-key mentioned that, and very indirectly stated, because of PlayStation 4 Pro, that was the test bed for future PlayStation generations, and that we could see PS5 live a life cycle of close to 6 to 7 years. So you're seeing a lot of people discuss that PlayStation 5, we could potentially get a PlayStation 6 in 2026, 2027 with a PS5 Pro in there. Now, we had a rumor about PS5 Pro not that long ago, and it was only from one source, where we would get PS5 and a PS5 Pro day and date. Now, that's the only time we ever heard that rumor. We never got one again, so very likely that might not hold up now, and Sony's going to go with one SKU. But I thought it was kind of implied. That's why I avoided it, because, I've beaten that horse to death, where it's like, I say so many times, PS4 Pro was that proof of concept for going forward into the next generation, meaning that we're definitely going to get a PS5. It's just a matter of when. Well, now it looks like we might get it just in that mid spot, just like the PS4 Life Cycle. So I hate to keep saying that Sony's being very formulaic, but I mean, if that's how it's going to play out, that's how it's going to play out. Next up, we've got a new patent out of SIE, and it is for, it looks like this is kind of an expansion of the share play feature, but what this is implying is that when you're playing a single player game and you're sharing it, the controller play it remotely, now you can specify certain sections of the controller to be controlled by that person. So you could potentially play a single player game, but you could control just the triggers or the face buttons or the D-pad, the sticks. Seems really weird, and it seems like a frustrating way to play a game, but amazingly, I was reading some stuff online, and some people really did this. Not over the internet, because it's not something that's available on PlayStation now currently, but people would like do this like holding one controller, and their buddy would hold another one, the other side of it locally, and it just seems frustrating. But anyway, sorry I'm moving through these quickly because I know this is so long. Dreams, we're getting an update that when it gets that launch on February 14th, there won't be any PSVR support, but Media Molecule is stating that it's being worked on ASAP. So people around the office are definitely working on it, and they're trying to get that out in a reasonable amount of time. So if you're in Dreams, if you're waiting for that VR content, what that's going to look like and what that will do for the creativity aspect of it and creating levels, that's totally soup. That's the thing, is that it's already such a very creative game, and you're seeing so much amazing stuff in there, but the VR aspect of it I think is also going to elevate it to a different level as well, so that is still coming. But while we're talking about PSVR, it's going to move on to this one about Half-Life Alyx, which we haven't really mentioned here because it's a Half-Life game, not really coming to PlayStation, or maybe it will. It seems like Valve is actually being a bit more open about this, so they've stated that there is no PSVR version in the works, although they are open to it. And that's the thing about VR content, is that it's not really in your best interest to do exclusive VR stuff, and I know that seems weird. Well, Sony does a lot of exclusive VR stuff because, well, that's what Sony does. But, if you're developing on Oculus, or you're making something on Vive, or that Oculus Quest, or any other weird little off-branded VR headset, I mean, you're going to want to get on PSVR because it has market leadership. It has the most units out there. And it will do really well for you, especially because VR typically is this platform where it's a high attach rate for a lot of software. So one VR user is pretty active and likes to buy a lot of stuff. So you're going to want to be on PSVR. Now, with Half-Life Alyx, I mean, Half-Life is a big deal. This trailer, for a virtual reality game, the Half-Life name has given this trailer 9 million views on YouTube. What does that tell you? That Half-Life is still alive and well, that there's still plenty of interest in here. For this franchise and for this entry in the game. So it's a big deal. It'd be great if it was on PSVR, although I will say the game looks very impressive, meaning that if it comes to PSVR on PS4, it would probably have to see a significant downgrade. So maybe if it ever does come to PSVR, it might happen on a next generation version of it, because in the timeline there works out anywhere where if they get the time to port it over to another platform, by then you would hope that Sony either announced the next headset, or we know that it's publicly coming, something like that, you know what I mean? But that would be great if it did come over. But now let's get to Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you could win a $10 PSN code, and I'd like to congratulate AQ. You have won. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. Now, if you would like to win a $10 code, very simple, follow that link down below to the Gleam website. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and the winner will be announced next week. We do this all the time here on Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm trying to pay for your games. Those are all the news stories that I want to talk about you all from this past week. On Tuesday, we had a State of Play, so that's why I didn't do a normal random video. I felt like it would have been weird to do that next to a State of Play ignoring all the news, so instead we recapped State of Play, got my impressions, and a Q&A. That's a rare time where I'll do a Q&A, so that's why you should always follow on Twitter to be a part of those conversations, and I can answer questions on camera, although we should probably do a Q&A at some point outside of that. Also, it's almost the end of the year, which means we can do our annual PlayStation predictions. I've been doing it since 2015 now. It's always fun to grade myself from last year, and well, see how I'll do for the upcoming year. And there's a lot more subscribers here now, which is awesome. We've built a pretty good community, which also means I will be under a lot more scrutiny this time around. And 2020 is going to be a fun year to predict because we're getting that next-gen PlayStation. So there's a lot of things that could go down, and I am ready for it. But this coming Tuesday, we got another unboxing. A lot of weird stuff I'm finding on the internet lately, so we gotta unbox it on video. You'll be pleased to see what's coming up. It's pretty, I don't want to say wild, but it's caught me off guard for sure. But that's this Tuesday, so be on the lookout for that. And that's it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.